Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Women in Motorsports. Joe Samaniego here, along with Ben Schneider. Ben, you're over in California. It's race day, race weekend coming up for you, so very excited. How is everything treating you so far in beautiful, sunny California?
Everything's going well. It's going to be pushing 100 degrees. It's snowing today, though, so I'm not necessarily looking forward to that. But it's going to cool down a little bit as the weekend goes on. So hopefully the predictions come to fruition, and I'm excited to get back out on the track again this weekend.
And of course, we all know how the heat that affects the drivers in the stock cars as well as the grip with the surface is going to be very exciting. And of course, we want to thank our Patreon subscribers, Con the Show, Mark and Robin, for keeping us on the air and making last weekend possible. Ben and I covering the event in Portland International Raceway. And of course, Ben now going over to Sonoma for the NASCAR Cup Series. You too can also invest in the GRID Network by going to our Patreon or buy me a coffee, where there is the one-time contribution option for you as well. Now, Ben, last weekend at Portland International Raceway, Bridget Burgess, the ARCA Menards West Series, that race was very challenging. We were there, of course, primarily to cover the NASCAR Xfinity Series race. We saw the rain come. About midway through the race, started getting a little heavier, but then it stopped. So by the time AJ Allmendinger had taken the win, track was dry enough to make some burnouts, get the tires all smoking hot for victory lane. However, during the press conference, we hear the heavy rains coming and the ARCA Menards engine starting up, and we just knew this was going to be a race. The race called short because of the heavy rain, but these were some tricky conditions, and we saw Bridget Burgess. She handled it all race long between 7th, 6th, 5th, even getting up to 4th place. She had a phenomenal race under these tricky conditions. What was your take, especially she didn't have a windshield wiper? The spotters, they can only see the front stretch. We saw where they were. How impressive was this to see her race, and especially that first lap where we know ARCA, they told the drivers, don't worry about the festival car, just go straight on the first lap and the restart. We had the top two in the starting go off, and she continues on. She drove a really smart race, it appears.
Yeah, well, Jake Drew and Daniel Dye were both able to recover from that, and obviously Drew went on to get the win, so it's a long time coming, in a bit of redemption for him after what happened to him last year. But yeah, I mean, you'll see in the interview, Bridget was talking about how it wasn't really so much, the windshield wiper or lack thereof. I don't know if her team had Rain-X on the windshield or what to help with that, but she said the bigger issue was actually the fogging inside of the car. So she was definitely relying on her spotters to help her with that. But yeah, it was a fantastic run. I know she's very strong on the road courses, and she said it actually reminded her of tricky conditions of her off-road racing background, where there's not nearly as much traction. She did kind of spin off a little bit on the last restart, so she got shuffled back a little bit. That's why she ended up down in 7th place, the last car in the lead lap. And of course, the race was obviously shortened because the conditions were getting to be a little bit worse, and it was getting later in the day. But still a fantastic run. Like I said, it ties her career best. I think she was 7th at the Bull Ring in 2020. So it's the second time she's finished 7th in a West Series race. And now we're going to Sonoma this week, where she ran in the top 5 again last year and finished 8th. So, you could expect another decent run from her again this weekend. I don't know, but she can be a contender to win the race. We got to keep our expectations in check because she does drive for a smaller family-owned team. It's not like she's driving for a Bill McAnally Racing or a Sunrise Ford Racing. But I think a top 10 is certainly a reasonable goal for her. Top 5 would be very impressive for that team.
Top 5 would be very impressive for that team. As you mentioned, when it comes to the bigger teams, they're lacking the more resources. But she did run really good. And last year when she ran at Sonoma, she had a lot of front-end damage from some contact early on in that race. So be interesting to see how Bridget does. Here is that interview you had with her following last weekend's ARCA race.
All right, we're here with Bridget Burgess, who just finished 7th, ties your career best. I know you're up in the top 5 for much of the day as well. How would you assess how your race went?
I had a lot of fun out there. I'm definitely happy that it's my best run so far. It was a learning experience out there in the rain with a 3,400-pound car and 600 horsepower. But I had a lot of fun. I love the Portland International Raceway. Road courses are my favorite. So now I'm just ready for the next race in Sonoma.
Take us through how difficult it was to see out there, especially I noticed your car doesn't have a windshield wiper on it. Did that affect your visibility at all?
Yeah, it wasn't like so much the fact of just wiping away the water, I guess. It was the fact that it was fogging up so bad inside the car, and then it just looked like a blur. So thankfully, you know, my dad's my spotter, and he was helping me out a ton. Unfortunately, it's not like he could see the whole track. So for the other half of the track, I was on my own. But as for the French straight, he was helping me out a lot, and yeah, it was a big learning experience, though.
So one more thing I want to ask you. I know your mother, Sarah, almost made history at Irwindale. I know she's been wanting to get behind the wheel of one of these cars herself. Is there any update on when we might see her join you out on the racetrack?
Yeah, so unfortunately we are going to have to move it back. Instead of Irwindale, we're going to do the Bull Ring, which will be a ton of fun because that's Las Vegas. So it'll be a huge party as a race. And yeah, we'll have a lot of fun. My mom and I will be bumping away. So
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Now, Ben, Sonoma, as you mentioned, pushing 100 degrees. Traditionally is known for being sunny. Overall, especially considering how her team, much smaller outfit compared to some of the bigger teams, do you feel the rain was at a point advantage to where, okay, it equalized everybody? Or especially the level we had at Portland where it was just drenching rain, it just made it where that advantage was negated because everyone seemed to really struggle with the rain, especially General Tire compared to Goodyear. They don't have as much rain experience compared to Goodyear tires. Overall, where do you assess when it came to the rain at last weekend, and then as we come up to dry weather this weekend?
Yeah, I don't think we have to worry about the rain this weekend at Sonoma. I know we rarely do this time of year, but yeah, last week, I guess they always call rain the great equalizer in motorsports. So, you know, you can talk about it being an advantage for some, a disadvantage for others. At the end of the day, everybody still has to deal with the same conditions. And obviously, Bridget was, generally speaking, able to handle it pretty well. Like I said, she had that one off on the last restart there, but she put a good race together. And, you know, I'm expecting, if everything goes her way again this weekend, you know, like I said, she does a lot of testing at Utah Motorsports Campus. It's kind of her home track. So she's got a lot of testing laps under her belt on the road courses. And I think you're going to see that strength play out this weekend as well.
Yeah, the strength I think will play out as well this weekend. Of course, one of the changes we know this year, they're not using the carousel. Last year, the carousel was used. This year, the chute is back. For fans not too familiar with the chute, essentially it bypasses that carousel, which is a long downhill left-hand corner towards the straightaway where then turn 7 is a passing opportunity. This year, you go bypass that, take a right hand. It's still downhill, but there's plenty of paved runoff area. We've seen drivers use much as the exit before that concrete wall, and then a great passing opportunity before the S is straight ahead. Do you feel this is going to make the race where last year it was a bit more tricky for passing? This year, you know, you got that opportunity at the end of the chute to make the pass. Do you think we're going to see some more different aggressive driving?
I do, and I'm excited to see the chute come back. You know, I think the carousel was a nice experiment, and I know a lot of fans have talked about wanting to run the boot when NASCAR goes to Watkins Glen, but I think the short courses with the chutes are better at both tracks. You know, after seeing what happened with the carousel, I'd be a little bit more hesitant to try the boot out on the NASCAR side of things when we go back to the Glen. I know some fans still want to do that, but you know, based on how the carousel went, I think the chute is probably the better layout for the stock cars, and I think you're going to see a better passing opportunity at that area of the track this year, and you're certainly going to see the aggression turned up as well.
Yeah, the aggression seems to turn up as well. I don't know why it's been coming up on my feed lately, a clip from a past ARCA race in the chute where we saw one car flipping in the air.
Seems like Jeff Jefferson on his roof.
Yep. So we'll see how.
I forget if it was. I think it was Camping World West maybe at the time. I think that was in 07 or so. So.
Yep, 2007. So it's been showing up on my feed, and it's like, are you trying to tell me something about this upcoming ARCA race weekend? Because they're going to the chute, and I think it's going to be a really exciting race. Of course, the ARCA Menards West at Sonoma Raceway, and of course, Ben, as well as Brandon, they'll be recapping it on GRID Encore next week. Now, one of the things, of course, besides Bridget Burgess, over in Gateway, that's where we have the NASCAR Cup Series and the Camping World Truck Series. And there we had Hailie Deegan. She was out there racing, and overall she got her best finish. It looked like at first it was going to be 17th, tying her best. Then it got bumped up to 16th, and then it got bumped up to 15th. So a change because on the last lap there was a caution flag that occurred during the white flag lap, so the field was frozen at the moment of caution. So it's her best finish of this year, but it misses out compared to last year at Gateway, where she got her career best 7th place. So overall, still not exactly the season Hailie Deegan wants. And Ben, we're coming really close to the playoffs. When it comes to the playoffs for the Truck Series, for fans not familiar, you got to win to get in or be in the top 10 in points, because for the trucks, it's only the top 10. The races remain. We have Sonoma Raceway, of course, this weekend, Knoxville, a dirt track, and then Nashville Superspeedway, Mid Ohio, Pocono, and then the playoff round of 10 will start at Indianapolis Raceway Park. Is Hailie at a must-win situation, and do you see any track where she could potentially pull off that win?
Well, she's definitely in a must-win. She's far enough back in points that I think mathematically it's going to be virtually impossible to find a scenario where she can point her way in. Without winning a race, especially. Even if she went out and won a bunch of races, trying to point her way in, I think would be very difficult. And then if she wins, obviously she's set with that. The issue is I don't know. I mean, you listed off some tracks there, Joe. Obviously, we have Knoxville coming up, and she has a dirt racing background, so maybe that's a track where you could say if everything goes her way. I mean, we know how crazy that race was last year. That might be an opportunity for her to steal a win. But, we're a season and a half into her Truck Series career now, and she's still just sitting on that one top 10 finisher, which you see on that screen that she got at Gateway last season. And for, 15th to be her season best, it's kind of hard to sugarcoat it. It has been a pretty disappointing start to the year. And, approaching the playoffs, definitely you see her in a must-win situation now. And, when you talk about her career, generally speaking, I know there was some talk this weekend again that she's trying to put an Xfinity race or two together at the end of the year. At some point, you do have to prove that you belong and finish in the top 10 more often than not. I'd just be a little bit hesitant about her moving up to Xfinity at this point based on her lack of performance, relatively speaking, in the Truck Series. Now, I think there is still time for her to turn it around. She has a good team with David Gilliland Racing. They've won some races with Ryan Preece, and obviously Zane Smith in that Front Row Motorsports truck is very much related. It's kind of like the Wood brothers and Penske in the Cup Series. So, they have the equipment, they have the backing to do it, but it needs to happen sooner rather than later in terms of putting the results together. And, if you talk about trying to make the playoffs this year, it's definitely a must win at this point.
Must win at this point. 24 points right now, Hailie Deegan, so way outside the playoff field. And when it comes to those races, it seems like, okay, we saw last year the dirt race, it got a little bit hectic, a little bit crazy towards the end. There's some controversy about if the drivers were racing with a lack of respect, something Hailie Deegan has been bringing up a little bit lately, feeling she's been raced a little bit more differently than others. Now, Ben, I know I asked Daniel this question, and we talked a little bit about it, how it seems that when it comes to sports or even workplace, sometimes women experience a little bit of a different treatment compared to men. But of course, we know Hailie Deegan, in the past, she has used that bumper to get the win. When it comes to NASCAR, is this just something where at the end, this is something where just more the frustration of the lack of a successful season might be starting to come in, and this is more just the nature of the racing, where especially if you're in the back, the mid-pack, they're speeding and banging and everyone trying to get towards the front.
Well, I'm sure there's definitely some frustration. I think she would have liked to have had some top fives and a few more top tens by now at this point in her truck career. But, it is easy to, look past the K&N days. And, you do have to remember that all three of her wins in that series came from last lap passes by the bumper on the leader. So, and the last one even spun out her teammate at the time, Derek Kraus, entirely. So, when she talks about aggression, I think she does have a point. I think the Truck Series is pretty ruthless right now. I think there's a lot of younger drivers. You do have your mix of veterans like your Matt Craftons and your Johnny Sauters that are still around, but it is a lot of times I think younger drivers that don't have the old school mentality of working on their own trucks anymore. And, I think when ultimately it comes to a wrecked race truck, the responsibility doesn't lie with them as much as it did. So it leads to a bit more aggression and a little bit more carnage. And, that frustration is certainly there. And she has a valid point bringing it up. But you do have to look back at her own driving style and the aggression that she used, not just in trucks, but also in the ARCA Menards Series in 2020. And then obviously in K&N West, how she won each of her 3 races. She's shown that she can be an aggressive driver too. And at some point, I think we always come back to the discussion of, does it cross the line? Is it a bump and run or is it a dump and run? And, that was certainly a debate that we were having after every single one of her 3 wins in K&N West.
Yeah, after each of her wins, it seems like that was a big topic of discussion. Now, of course, we're coming to Sonoma. That track has been a fixture when it comes to ARCA West, K&N Filter West as well, too. Do you feel this is a potential race weekend for her where she might be eyeing a top 10 finish? Or do you think the road course experience and some of the other truck drivers is just going to be just as hard as any other oval we have?
It's tough to say. It's the first time, I think, since 1998 that we're going back to the truck. The truck series is going back to Sonoma. So, it's going to be a new track for the vast majority of these drivers, at least in a truck. So, like I said, it's kind of hard to predict a winner just all throughout the field. In terms of Hailie specifically, she did sit on pole for the West race in 2019 in a race that featured a handful of Cup drivers. So she has been able to put down fast laps at Sonoma before and have some strong runs. But again, it's going to be a matter of putting an entire race together. And, in terms of a top 10 finish, I wouldn't put that entirely out of the question this weekend. But that's probably, like I said, it's difficult to predict.
Very difficult to predict. Of course, the cautions as well. We've seen at times drivers use strategy to get higher positions. One of the most famous one I can think of in the Cup Series was Terry Labonte again, Hall of Fame racing, a near win out there, but the older tires fade at the end. He didn't get that win. This is the DoorDash 250, so it's going to be a very short race compared to the SafeMart Supermart Toyota 350 later that Sunday. With the stages, do you feel this is just going to be more limiting for someone, especially if Hailie Deegan has a mediocre, poor qualifying? Just makes it harder for them to get towards the front considering it's such a short race. And with the stages, almost everyone's just going to pit in the stage breaks. You got to risk not pitting essentially to try to get any position.
Yeah, I mean, people know I'm not a fan of stage racing generally speaking, but I think specifically on the road courses, it's really killed a strategy aspect of it. I remember when I was younger, there were guys that, would try to do the Cup race on 2 stops. And so they wouldn't fire up their engines on the command because they were trying to save as much fuel as possible. Those days are obviously long gone because you have 2 planned caution periods when you're going to have to pit. And, it really throws a wrench in trying to go off strategy and do something a little bit different. Obviously, the truck race is going to be a little bit shorter, so I'm not sure exactly how it's going to play out yet, but I imagine it's going to be something similar. So it's going to be interesting to see if we do see somebody try to go off strategy or how successful they're going to be there. But like I said, this is a brand new race. Not a brand new race, I guess, but a brand new race for the majority of us. I was born in '99, so that was a year after the last time the Truck Series visited this place. So it's been a little while. It's going to be tough to predict what we're going to see.
Tough to predict what we're going to see, and of course, back then we didn't have stages, so it was really interesting with just straightforward racing. Had some cautions here and there. This race, of course, we could have an absolute caution fest, and that's just going to allow opportunities after opportunities for drivers to then pit off cycle and go from there. Hailie Deegan, when it came to her, 2018 she finished 7th. 2019 she finished 9th there in the NASCAR K&N Pro Series West races, but that was also when she was part of Billy McAnally Racing, Toyota. Now she's with the Fords. It's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out. And of course, you're going to be following both those races in Sonoma. Ben, when it comes to especially Sonoma, and we got a busy weekend with ARCA West, the Truck Series, Cup Series. Yeah, we have Bridget Burgess there. We got Hailie Deegan there. Do you think this is really a wonderful opportunity, especially we've seen NASCAR, their in San Francisco for media events, trying to get new fans. To have these two drivers out there in Sonoma, a huge win to encourage female racers, especially young fans, like, hey, you too could be a race car driver.
Yeah, I think so. I think Bridget and Hailie certainly have a very sizable following and fan bases that are backing them. So it's great to see them both on the same track this weekend. And obviously, I think Hailie's following is just tremendous. You look at her numbers on Instagram and her YouTube channel and everything. So I think it's good to have them in the series and bring a little bit of spotlight. There might be people that were following even Brian Deegan's career before Hailie's own career got started. And so they know who Hailie is and they know a little bit of her story, but they don't know too much about the truck series. So it's a good opportunity to bring some new fans into there. And similarly, Bridget Burgess's mother, Sarah, is an accomplished off-road racer in her own right. So, that could play a similar role to the ARCA West series that Hailie Deegan was able to bring to it back when it was K&N West. So, we'll see. I'm expecting it's probably a stronger track for both Bridget and Hailie in terms of their strengths that we've seen over the years. And we'll see how they do. I guess both of those races are going to be tomorrow. And then you got the Cup race on Sunday. So it's going to be a great weekend of racing in Sonoma.
Great weekend of racing in Sonoma. And already we've had some great racing action going on. We had something historic over at USAC, the United States Auto Club NOS Energy Drink National Midgets at Lincoln Speedway last night. First time ever in qualifying. The top 4 qualifiers were all female racers. Jade Averson, Kelly Ray Bryson, Taylor Reimer, and Mariah Aid, all of them getting on the pole for their heat. Now, for fans not familiar with how this works, the top 4 fastest means they are the pole sitter for 4 heat races, in which the top 4 finishers advance to the feature race. If you don't get in the top 4, you have an opportunity through a semifinal race where you could try to get in, and a last chance as well too. So starting with Heat 1, in which Jade Averson led the pole. She is from Clovis, California. She got second place in her heat, so that meant she was going to advance to the feature. Kaylee Bryson from Muskogee, Oklahoma, second place. Again, she advances. But this is where it gets interesting. Taylor, out of Bixby, Oklahoma, she got 5th, so she wasn't locked into the feature. She had to go into the semifinal, and there she finally transferred in. Then Mariah, out of Fresno, California, she got 9th, but then in her heat, that 9th place finish means she didn't get out, so she transfers through the semifinal transfer as well. And then in the feature race, this is where we saw the big challenge, in which we saw at the end, none of them unfortunately get the win. Only one, Kaylee, got a top 10 finish, which we saw Taylor get 11th place, Jade Everson and Mariah got 22nd and 20th respectively. Overall, it didn't exactly go the race weekend as they wanted in Lincoln Speedway, but it was still a huge accomplishment that all 4 of them got pole position and take a big win when it comes to bringing the attention that women out there can race in motorsports. They can do a lot, because at the end, the car does not know gender, race, sexual orientation. It only takes talent and, of course, sometimes a little bit of luck to get that win, because in motorsports, we know it is one of the most unpredictable forms of sports around the world. And, of course, we encourage everyone to visit the website Racers Behind the Helmet there to get a full recap and preview of everything going on. This race weekend, we have the 24 Hours of Le Mans coming up. We have Sophia Flores racing there. A lot going on all over the world of motorsports. And of course, one of the big things, we encourage everyone to be sure to visit the website Racers Behind the Helmet, as well as our website, gridranking.com. There you get a full listing of all our programs that are upcoming throughout the 2022 year. Ben, I know it's getting really exciting. The 2022 season is really in full swing, and we got this great race, the Le Mans 24 Hours. Are you going to be able to follow this race during the weekend, or are you just going to be too busy where you're going to have to follow up after the race weekend?
It's unfortunate that there's racing that conflicts this weekend. Obviously, you got Formula One in Baku and, the NASCAR series here at Sonoma. So, being on site covering that this weekend, it's going to be very difficult for me to tune in. I'll probably be able to see the start, but, I think that's probably going to be it. We're going to be so, invested in our coverage with NASCAR at Sonoma that, it's going to be kind of tough to keep an eye on it as we're covering the race. I'll do my best, but in terms of actually getting to sit down and watch and enjoy it this year, is probably going to have to wait until next year, unfortunately.
I hear you. Next year, going to be one of those race weekends. I'll be following it. Same time following Formula One, NASCAR. A lot of talk about next year. Formula One, they're not going to race this race at the same time as the 24 Hours of Le Mans next year, hopefully. And of course, we know NASCAR with their garage, NASCAR 56, I believe. I would assume they're not going to race at the same time Le Mans, especially you want a top-tier driver going out there to race. So it's going to be really interesting. Hopefully next year, everyone could follow this great race of 24 Hours of Le Mans, especially with the hypercar era. And again, we want to thank our Patreon subscribers, calling the show Mark and Robin, for keeping us on the air through Patreon. If you want to do a one-time contribution, buy me a coffee, keep us on the air, keep us going to the tracks. Very exciting race weekend for all of us here. And of course, you can follow the GRID Network on all our social media platforms, plus TikTok, and of course our website, gridranking.com. And Ben, I know you got a very excited weekend, but of course that night's going to start off tonight. Very excited that we're going to have the newest episode of Life on the Grid, which you and Kobe talked to Brock Beard. That's going to be debuting at 7 p.m. Eastern tonight. Ben, overall, when it comes to, we know there's a trailer out there for fans circling, but for fans not familiar, who is Brock Beard and why is this going to be such an awesome episode of Life on the Grid?
Yeah, well, you mentioned the trailer. I put a trailer up on my YouTube channel and on my socials yesterday. So Brock is the founder and editor-in-chief of a website called lastcar.info, and I'm wearing my NASCAR hat today. I'll be doing the same thing at the track later this afternoon. And it's a site that's dedicated, primarily it's in the name NASCAR. It's dedicated to the last place finisher of every race. So Brock takes the last place finisher every week and does a short article on them and kind of tells their backstory and talks about their race weekend and what led to their last place finish. And usually, going along with the theme of the website, it's about a smaller team or smaller budget driver that doesn't get a lot of media attention that you see the champions and race winners of the sport get. Occasionally, of course, you do see a champion crash out on the opening lap, and then Brock's writing about them that weekend. But I think the larger mission of the site and what it's evolved to in recent years in particular is to kind of tell those stories of the underdogs and the underfunded beyond just the last place finisher, and to show a little bit of love to the smaller teams of the sport. And it's something that I've been a supporter of for over a decade now, and Brock's still going strong, and he's going to be continuing his trackside coverage this weekend at Sonoma. And of course, we had the Life on the Grid episode that we did a couple of weeks ago with him that's going to be premiering tonight. There's some great stuff in that episode as well. You're going to learn a little bit more about Brock away from the track, as well as what went into putting together his book on JD McDuffie and some of his YouTube projects and some of his thoughts on where the sport is today. Brock is a little bit older than I am, grew up a NASCAR fan in the 1990s, so the sport was very different back then. And, he's not going to hold back. He does have some issues with things like the charter system and, the standards of the broadcast compared to, what it was back in the 1990s with Bob Jenkins and ESPN and those sorts of things. So, I think it's going to be a great episode, very wide-ranging episode in terms of the topics that we're going to be discussing.
Well, it's a very great episode. I pretty much echo everything you say, and especially growing up in the 90s, Bob Jenkins, Ned Jarrett, Benny Parsons, just Sunday mornings, because I was in Alaska, so it was 8 a.m. NASCAR start time, watching the Cup Series. Highly encourage, especially any fans that reminisce of racing in the 90s. This is a great episode of Life on the Grid to watch. For Ben Schneider at Sonoma, California, I'm Joe San Diego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time, and enjoy the races.
Don't be an anonymous investor. Join the stock market social media platform, public.com. Invest any amount of money and share with friends and new friends. Discover new opportunities, such as new companies and potential business partners, and useful tools for beginners, and share your experience with friends on public.com. Link in the video description gets you $5 for being a GRID Network viewer. Use the referral code GRIDNET for your free $5 to invest. Start investing and networking on public.com.